Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased once again to be your host, coming to you through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news. We advise you on what you can do about it. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming two special first-time guests, our sister activist Pam Africa and Dr. James Curtis McIntosh. We're going to be dealing with the topic, America and torture. Do they coexist? Now, Dr. McIntosh is a retired psychiatrist who practiced in all 5 boroughs of New York City over a 40-year career. And Pam Africa of the Philadelphia-based MOVE organization is a long-distance activist with many years of struggle under her belt. Now, Pam, inshallah ta'ala, will deliver a special update on one of 3 political prisoners we're going to be highlighting in today's broadcast, the award-winning journalist Mumia Abu-Jamal. But before she does, there are 3 videos that we'd like for you to see. And usually when we have videos, and we have videos in many of our broadcasts, they're interspersed through the broadcasts, and the conversation is around the videos as they are periodically played over the roughly 1 hour period that we are in conversation. But this time is going to be different. This time we're going to have 3 videos back to back. And then we will have the special report from Pan Africa, followed by some rich dialogue between myself and Dr. McIntosh. On that note, without any further ado, Brother Sadek, let's see those videos back to back, please.
When I was invited to speak on behalf of Mumia, one of the first things that came to mind was how long he's been in prison. How many years of his life have been stolen away from him, his community, and his loved ones. He has been incarcerated for 38 years. Mumia has been in prison longer than I've been alive. When I first spoke with Mumia on the phone, I did very little talking. I just listened. Hearing him speak was a reminder of why we must continue to fight. Earlier this year, the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner issued a statement noting that prolonged solitary confinement, the precise type often used in the United States, amounts to psychological torture. Mumia Abu-Jamal has spent roughly 30 out of his 38 years in solitary confinement. In his book, Live from Death Row, Mumia wrote that prison is a second-by-second assault on the soul, a day-to-day degradation of the self, an oppressive steel and brick umbrella that transforms seconds into hours and hours into days. He has had to endure this second-by-second assault on his soul for 38 years. He had no record before he was arrested and framed for the death of a Philadelphia police officer. Since 1981, Mumia has maintained his innocence. His story has not changed. Mumia was shot, brutalized, arrested, and chained to a hospital bed. The first police officer assigned to him wrote in a report that the Negro male made no comment, as cited in Philly Mag. Yet 64 days into the investigation, another officer testified that Mumia had confessed to the killing. Mumia's story has not changed. But we are talking about the same Philadelphia Police Department whose behavior shocks the conscious, according to a 1979 DOJ report. Behaviors like shooting nonviolent suspects, abusing handcuffed prisoners, and tampering with evidence. It should therefore come as little surprise that according to Dr. Johanna Fernandez, over 1/3 of the 35 officers involved in Mumia's case were subsequently convicted of rank corruption, extortion, and tampering with evidence to obtain convictions in unrelated cases. This is the same Philadelphia Police Department where officers ran racial profiling sweeps like Operation Cold Turkey in March 1985, targeting black and brown folks, and bombed the Move House in May of that year, killing 11 people, including 5 children, and destroying 61 homes. The same Philadelphia Police Department whose officers 8 days before the 2020 presidential election shot Walter Wallace Jr. dead in the streets in front of his crying mother. The Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police has unrelentingly campaigned for Mumia's execution. During their August 1999 national meeting, a spokesperson for the organization stated that they will not rest until Abu Jamal burns in hell. The former Philadelphia president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Richard Costello, went as far as to say that if you disagree with their views of Mumia, you can join him in the electric chair and that they will make it an electric couch. The trial judge on Mumia's case in 1981, Albert Sabo, was a former member of the Fraternal Order of Police. Court reporter Terry Moorer Carter overheard Judge Sabo telling a colleague, "I'm going to help them fry the nigger." Found in December 2018 in an inaccessible storage room of the DA's office, 6 boxes of documents from Mumia's case reveal previously undisclosed and highly significant evidence showing that Mumia's trial was tainted by a failure to disclose material evidence in violation of the United States and Pennsylvania constitutions. In November 2019, the Fraternal Order of Police filed a King's Bench petition asking the court to allow the state attorney general, not the Philadelphia DA's office, to handle the upcoming appeals. As the FOP president John McNesby said, just last year, Mumia should remain in prison for the rest of his life. And a King's Bench order provides the legal angle for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to uphold Judge Sabo's original wish, which was for Mumia ultimately to die in prison. Today we are living through a moment where it's acceptable to paint "End Racism Now" in front of the Philadelphia Police Department's 26th District headquarters. And yet a political prisoner who has since the age of 14 dedicated his life to fighting against racism continues to be caged and lives his life on a slow death row. We're in the midst of a movement that says Black Lives Matter. And if that's truly the case, then it means that Mumia's life and legacy must matter. And the causes that he sacrificed his life and freedom for must matter as well. Through all of the torture Mumia has suffered over the past 38 years, his principles have never wavered. These principles have manifested themselves in his writing countless books while incarcerated, in his successful radio show, in the time and energy he has poured into his mentorship of younger incarcerated folks, and the continued concern with the people suffering outside of the walls. Even while living in the hells of the prison system, Mumia still fights for our human rights. We must continue to fight for him and his human rights. Mumia is 66 years old. He is a grandfather. He is an elder with ailments. He is a human being that deserves to be free. Free Mumia.
See, it's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship.
if we go to YouTube and search H. Rap Brown, I don't think there's anyone, I think his performance was unparalleled. After, he became Imam Jamil, we know the tremendous work that was done.
We seek refuge in Allah from a knowledge that is not useful, from a heart in which there is no remembrance, from a prayer that is unanswerable, from a tongue that is not truthful, and from a soul that is ungrateful.
I don't think we either know or we give the proper appreciation for the work that Imam Jamil, even before embracing Islam in 1971. Imam Jamil was one of the most fearless individuals that they had ever met. African-American men said that they found their manhood. They found how to express their manhood in the face of conflict because of the example and the words of Imam Jamil. The loss for almost the last 20 years that the Muslim community has suffered is a loss that has been, to a certain degree, suffered by the non-Muslim community as well. Even after this bogus conviction, he's still not able to publicly speak about the situation.
Now it's time to kind of scrub that clean and get him back to, the position of reverence that he deserves to be in, because he's done so much for us at this point as a ummah and as Black people. They understand the power of his words, to move people to whatever action. That's the reason why he's in federal custody at this moment. It's because, they put the leader of the Aryan nation in a cell next to him and they got to talking and he took Shahada.
That's true.
After that, they were like, okay, federal custody, solitary, we don't have time for this. And we can't let you speak to anybody. But they knew that, all the way back in the trial. So the current gag order is an unofficial gag order. Basically, it's just if you request an interview, they're going to say no. And the most pervasive thing in all of this is that since before day one of the trial, the guy who did it said, I did it.
That you had committed a murder and were involved in the shooting of a cop in March of 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
All right. You weren't arrested for it, were you?
No, sir, I was not.
In fact, another person was tried and convicted.
Jamil Alameen, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Throughout the trial, they cheated time and time again. And when I say cheated, I mean cheated. From faulty ballistics, the lady who did the ballistics in our trial, who was, hired by the state, she was fired from her job because she did faulty ballistics. The ballistics don't match. The description matches the guy who confessed. They said the man who shot these police officers was wounded. The guy who confessed was wounded. My father wasn't wounded. And so then all of a sudden the blood that was found on the scene, they couldn't find a match because it didn't match the imam. All the way to the constitutional violation. They violated his constitutional rights a few times, but the most prominent one was they did a mock cross-examination where they asked him questions in the closing argument and then answered the questions for him to the jury after he exercised his right not to testify, because we believe that they didn't present a strong enough case that warranted him to have to testify. We proved that he didn't do it. It's just so many things that happened in this one trial. I mean, we have all these other things listed out and we want them to review that as well. But it's like, hey, look, this guy Otis Jackson, he's sitting in prison in Florida. He's telling you he did it. He's been telling you he did it. We have three affidavits from him. We have him on video. We have handwritten like every kind of confession you can possibly get from a guy, he gave us. So it's like, what do y'all want? Like, if nothing else, we deserve a new trial, but realistically, let the imam go. Like, let him go. Look, this isn't even in line with the man we know and love and have this respect for. If nothing else, he's told you he didn't do this.
And verily, man has been created into toil and struggle, that it is a part and parcel of the development that you encounter in this life, that you must struggle. So therefore, in this sense, the best struggle, the best way to be able to struggle, deals with following the guidance.
So Rafia didn't have a chance in that court, meaning that the chances of someone not being convicted are less than 1%. they give her 80 years in prison. I think there are some people in Pakistan who are very afraid that when Afia Siddiqui comes home, that there's going to be a big thing and there's going to be exposés about how various Pakistani authorities were involved in what happened to her and all the rest of it, and it's all going to be terribly embarrassing. Afia. It was quite a palaver getting in because it's a military base and it's just like Guantanamo Bay. They're the most inefficient places in the world. But again, it was 3 hours it took to get actually into the prison base to where her place is. And that was very much a maximum security prison in America. So, that was a matter of going through a whole bunch more doors and gates. And then we weren't allowed to have a contact visit in the sense that we weren't allowed to be in the same room. It had to be through glass, which I always hate that because it's not nearly as personal an experience. But Afia was shown in to the other side and she sat down and I was seated there already. And she talked a lot. In the next 80 minutes, she did most of the talking. But my first impression was the physical one, that you could immediately see that all of her teeth had been knocked out on the lower jaw, and that was consistent with what I knew about an incident that had happened in prison. Otherwise, she didn't look in terrible physical condition. She was wearing a headscarf and, a prison uniform, so you couldn't exactly get a full assessment of her. But it was very, very obvious quickly that she was emotionally very traumatized. And most of the time that I was there, that's what we talked about. We talked about what she was going through, the dreadful conditions of the prison, and her psychological state. I know the procedural posture of her case. She's had a trial. She's had what we call a 2255, which is basically a petition for a writ of habeas corpus after you've been convicted. And both of those are in the past. In America, you're then in a very, very bad position legally. It's very hard to bring a second 2255 on behalf of anyone. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. She's in a bad legal posture. I don't think she's going to get out of prison based on another appeal and a retrial. I think that's quite unlikely. We'll definitely look into it. But I think we have to look at other ways of getting her out. And there are several. I mean, first there's a compassionate approach. And I think one thing we need to do is get a proper, full medical evaluation of her, if we can possibly do that. And for that we need the help of the Pakistan government. It's going to have to be the Pakistan consulate in Houston who's going to have to cooperate with us to get a doctor in there to see her. That's a possibility. It's a much better possibility if we do it fairly quickly because President Biden is president only for another under 2 years. And we don't want to run the risk that we get President Trump again or some other Republican like DeSantis. That would make it far, far more difficult. So we need to do this while we have a Democratic president. And then beyond that, there are political ways that we can move forward, and that involves getting some sort of prisoner transfer arrangement. That I've done that several times over the years, getting a prisoner transferred from one country to another. But those are very political, and we're going to have some cooperation from the Pakistan government on that.
Why was an alleged terrorist put behind a curtain and not behind bars? She was taken to the counter-terrorism questioning room. Why wasn't she secure? Why would these officers just walk in there? There are too many questions here for anyone to assume guilt. You must presume innocence.
Well, Afia's case was tried in federal court in the United States. And contrary to what most people think, that's the very worst place to be. And certainly the Southern District of New York is a dreadful place to be. And the reason for that is they have just overwhelming power. It's not that the lawyers in her case had insufficient money. They had plenty of money. They just didn't do it very properly. I mean, Afia's case is a political case. It's not a case about what the facts are. And unfortunately, in federal court, there tends to be an enormous pressure towards just making it about whatever happens in a few instances according to the government. And it's a very, very difficult place to win. So if you're in the Southern District of New York, they get to choose who they prosecute and how they prosecute them, and they have over a 99% conviction rate, meaning that the chances of someone not being convicted are less than 1%. So Afia didn't have a chance in that court. And then once you're convicted, you're up against an incredibly vindictive system. You know, they give her 80 years in prison, for goodness sake. She's not going to live for 80 years. She's not eligible to be set free until she's 115 years old.
Well, not just Dr. Afia Siddiqui has a particularly tragic case because she disappeared with 3 of her children. The youngest one was 1.5 years old. It is one of the most shameful chapters in the history of our country, where our own agencies handed her over with her children to the Americans.
The politicians in Pakistan, no matter what party, are all on Afia Siddiqui's side because they recognize as political people that 99% of the Pakistan population want Afia back home. So it doesn't matter what party you're in, you're going to support what we're trying to do. The problem in Pakistan comes not from the political system, but from the non-political system, from the deep state, as they call it, which is not really a deep state. We all know what it is. It's pretty much on the top of the state. And these are people who are unaccountable to the democratic system. And the biggest problem we have is this, and it's not unique to Pakistan. The same is true in America. I could tell you so many stories about things that the American intelligence agencies believe to be true. And I think the same is what's going on here. There are people who are afraid of things that they just shouldn't be afraid of. I'll give you an example. And I don't know this for sure because no one's talked to me about it, but I'm pretty certain this is what's going on. I think there are some people in Pakistan who are very afraid that when Afia Siddiqui comes home, that there's going to be a big thing and there's going to be exposés about how various Pakistani authorities were involved in what happened to her and all the rest of it, and it's all going to be terribly embarrassing and they're going to be sued into the next generation and whatever. And that's why people oppose her being released. That's my guess. Now, you know, when I say guess, I'm pretty confident. So in response to their fears, let me just tell you this. What they're worried about is what we lawyers call total bullshit. There's not going to be any problems when Afia comes back to Pakistan. And there are several reasons for that. The main one is this poor woman is so traumatized that, like the Rabbanis, I'm not going to let her go on television with all of the journalists and all the rest of it because she couldn't do it. You've got to remember, this poor woman has been in a torture situation for 15 years now. And what she needs is she needs to be with her sister, Fawzia. She needs to be in hospital and she needs to be treated. And so she's not going to be going out there giving press conferences and of this and that. On the other hand, I'm going to do press conferences as often as I need to do it until we get her back. So let's just get her back.
Thank you for watching the full video. If you want to see more of such meaningful content, show your support by hitting the subscribe button.
Okay. Now, clearly the 38-year reference made by Colin Kaepernick in his statement is a giveaway that this commentary of his was delivered a few years ago. Mumia Abu Jamal has now been wrongfully imprisoned for over 42 years. Without any further ado, I'd like to bring our sister Pam on to provide us with an update on Mumia's condition.
We're ready?
Yes. My sister.
And
America and torture, do they coexist, Pam Africa?
American torture is like American apple pie. Yes, it exists. And we need to start calling these places what they are. They're death camps. And that are killing people with medical and dietary neglect, medical and dietary terrorism. And what they want us to do is sit down and accept these things. It's not acceptable, and we will not sit back. In the case of Brother Jamil Amin and Mumia Abu Jamal and many other political prisoners and people that are not seen as political prisoners in the United States, but here because of the politics of this government, they're all suffering the same plight, the medical and dietary terrorism. And in Jamil's case and Mumia's case, both of them had people who came back that was not in prison, was not doing well. That was doing well on the outside, who confessed, who signed affidavits, legal affidavits, pointing out that they were responsible for the murders of these police officers. And in different states, different cases, but what we have in common is freedom fighters, who will not back down, bend down, whatever, no matter where they're at. And, people keep hollering, free Mumia, free Jamil. They are free. We need to release them, because anytime both of these brothers can stand on the principle of righteousness with all that they have been through, I'm saying they're free, because this government want to break them. And, and how can they not be free here when they generate support around the world? The word is release them. And, in dealing with Mumia, they have outright tried to kill him several times, and it's through the prison. That's why we're directing right now phone calls, and I'm going to get back into everything else, phone calls to the prison, the secretary of the prison here, which is a man by the name of Laurel Hardy. And his number right from the beginning is 717-728-4109, and I will give that number again. And the reason why we're directing it, because at this particular point, Mumia's life is in these people's hands. They have manipulated papers and all throughout the prison. When Mumia filed and all to get health conditions, health conditions addressed. And they kept turning around and saying that he didn't need to go to any place, to a hospital or anything. His conditions was well. Well, Mumia, at the time that he's filing, he had swollen up so big at this time. I'm not talking about right now. He had swollen up so big through the medication that they was giving him for a condition that he did not have, which caused him to go almost into a diabetic coma. They almost killed him before we can get some relief for Mumia. Mumia did not have diabetes. He was suffering from what other people in that prison was suffering from, was hepatitis C at the time. And it was a black former Panther, well, they said once a Panther, you're always a Panther, by the name of Joseph Harris, and who went to visit Mumia, and he's a doctor, who said very clearly that Mumia had hepatitis C. They filed papers, the hospital turned them down, the prison turned them down. Then they filed papers and they took it outside into an outside court. That's where Mumia got released from. But during that trial, it was pointed out that the prison officials, when they could not get one of the doctors to sign on and lie and say that Mumia didn't have the problems he had, and they went ahead and wrote a paper up and signed this man's name to it. When he was brought into the courtroom, the attorney, Robert Bull, who's responsible for getting Geronimo Pratt out, Marshall Eddie Conway out, and several other political prisoners out. He's on Mumia's medical case. And when he brought the man into court and he asked him about the paper that he had signed, the official said that he didn't sign them papers. And he would not sign them papers because those papers were saying that Mumia was not medically, sick like he was. This happened in the courtroom, and there's a lot of other things that was found out, what they do to stop you from getting the proper help that you need. So anyway, Mumia winds up getting a hepatitis C cure, which was at that particular point $1,000 a pill. $1,000 a pill, and you had to take this pill for 90 days. We was told we'll never be able to get it for him, and because if we did, everybody else would be asking for it. Our position is very clear. We don't just fight for Mumia. We fight for all the wrong that's happening in there. So we were not just fighting for him. We wound up winning the suit. Bob Baldwin wound up winning the suit despite the government trying to not give him, the cure. Mumia got the cure and was able to get the cure through that case for all the prisons throughout the United States. And the thing is, the terrorism, that pill cost $3 a pill in third world countries. When it got here, it became $1,000 a pill. A sure kill for people inside the prison. What we found out that not only in the state of Pennsylvania was 476 people who had this hepatitis C. When we went to the Board of Health and to get information, we found out it was several thousand that was in the streets of Philadelphia who was hepatitis C. We had an epidemic there and they wasn't doing anything about it. So, your answer is yes. Inside the death camps and outside the death camps, what they call civilization or, whatever, the community. Right now, and it's a whole lot more. We got 10 minutes, but right now, Mumia is again suffering from medical and dietary terrorism, which is practiced by this prison. And there was 3 visits within the last month of people who went to see Mumia. When you hear him on his podcast, Mumia sounds right on. I mean, you throw your fist, go on, brother. You're right. They're not seeing the picture when Mumia's son and Mumia and Wadia's son went up to see him earlier towards the end of last month. He came home crying because what he saw was so devastating. Mumia had lost all his hair. His skin was beginning to get a rash around it. He had lost so much weight, and and he continued. He don't talk about himself on the visit. He's talking about everybody else. I went up a week and a half later, and Mumia hair had started to grow around the side. But at this point, he had been scratching, and his eyebrows, part of his eyebrows was off. And then on the side of his face, this whole black substance from a disease, eczema, and was beginning to spread. His arms from the wrist up all is as black as my shirt. His legs the same. The whole time I was there, he was scratching and digging and clawing at himself. And that's because of the pain, the itch, the terrorism. They're not treating him properly. The proper treatment for Mumia, an innocent man, is to release him home. But long as he and other people like our brother Jamil Al-Amin and others that's in these death camps are there and with evidence of innocence, I think all of them should be released. But I'm saying when you got evidence of clear innocence and you continue to torture these brothers that speak out, these freedom fighters that's in these death camps. You know, our job is to never give up and to be persistent and to be in a place where we expose these people. Letter writing is good and calling up is good. But when you show up at these monstrous churches where they want to be acceptable and respectable, and this is where you get them at. You pass out information to them. That's how we got the hepatitis C. That's how we got Mumia off of death row. But we got to continue to be persistent in what it is that we do.
That's right. Now, on that note, my sister, I couldn't think of a better note to end on than what you just ended on. And I regret that this this broadcast is only an hour, and we're already almost 50 minutes in. So I am going to have to let you go. Thank you for being here with us today, and just reiterate the point that the struggle must and will continue. Is there one final, 1 minute statement you'd like to make to the viewing and listening audience in South Africa, the United States, and in other parts of the world as it pertains to Mumia and political prisoners in general?
Yes, stay persistent. Our eyes, we're watching what is going on in South Africa, and we want that kind of consistency to come up, because we need to throw these people out our countries and get them out of Africa. Let us get back and get rid of them, here. Stay persistent and use South Africa as an example of standing up and being persistent and getting these people out. Thank you. Move.
Thank you, my sister. And as you all like to say, on the move.
Yeah.
May Allah bless the rest of your day. I understand that you're in Georgia right now. Is it Georgia or North Carolina?
No, North Carolina with one of our freedom fighters, Iowa Ferguson, whose husband was Herman Ferguson. We can't get into a lot of that now, but that's where I'm at, and getting support here.
Okay, well, may Allah bless your journey, make it safe, and bless you with a safe return home. And on the final note, let me just note that I like that scarf you're wearing around your neck. Bless you.
Yes.
Bless you. All right. Next, Dr. McIntosh. Dr. James Curtis McIntosh. We want to bring him on, Brother Sadiq, and continues our broadcast with some rich conversation. Brother Sadiq, let's bring Brother Dr. McIntosh on now. Dr. McIntosh, assalamu alaikum, and peace and all of that other good stuff to you, my brother.
Yes, peace to you also, my brother.
You know something, I noted that, our sister Pam Africa is a long distance freedom fighter, but you are as well. You're a trained psychiatrist. In fact, you put me in the mind. I mean, we just met, just recently we met, but in the little bit of exposure I've had to you thus far through that your weekly broadcast that you invited me to come on, and then that hours-long forum that you moderated, that I was able to see in its entirety. You put me in the mind of that. His name is escaping me right now, but he's that revolutionary psychiatrist from Martinique.
Fanon.
Frantz Fanon. Yes, Frantz Fanon. That's what you put me in the mind of, my brother. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad to be able to welcome you on our platform, the Salam Media platform, for the first time. I put the same question to you, my brother, as I did to our sister Pam. America and torture, do they coexist?
Not only do they coexist, basically America was founded on torture. At the time that they were writing that amendment, they have an amendment to up to the United States Constitution called the Eighth Amendment that says, no cruel and unusual punishments should be administered. We had millions of African people here who the only way they were being kept in the condition they were in is through torture. You can't keep a person enslaved where they work from can't see to can't see. In other words, before it's light and till after it's light. You can't keep people in that condition. You can't tell them, listen, when your daughter gets old enough, you have to send her up to the big house for the master to have pleasure with her. Or if I want, you have to send your wife to me. You can't do that. People will endure death. Something worse than death has to be done to them. And if you look at the pictures of that have been drawn about what was happening to our people during the times of slavery, the worst kinds of tortures were being administered to them. That's the only way. And I mean by people such as the founder of the United States, or it's not the founder, the first president of the United States, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, those sorts of things. Torture is the only way that you can cause that to come into being. And during that broadcast that you said you saw, we showed a guy who talked about the hog's head torture, where they put nails in a barrel and they put an African in it and they put a hog's head in it and then rolled it down a hill. That's the least of the things they did. They came from a culture in which they came out of the Inquisition, in which they were trying to root out what they call secretly practicing Jews, Marranos, they call them. And in the course of that, a person by the name of Torquemada, was the Grand Inquisitor of the Spanish Inquisition. And the three biggest tortures they used were pulling people's arms out of their sockets, putting them on the rack. And then if they didn't get the information they want, or if they decided the person was not a Christian, they would burn them. And so that's where they came out of. The things they did to each other in Europe, breaking each other on the wheel, was where they would take you and put you to the wheel and take a sledgehammer and hit you in every limb until you finally died. Those were the things they did to Africans. In the rebellion in New York that they had in 1712, they did that to some of the people, but some of the people who participated in that rebellion actually killed themselves and their families because torture was such an integral part of slavery. They knew what was going to happen to them for rebelling. So now that's during the slavery period. Then we had the Jim Crow period, in which they sent postcards of what they would do to our people. It was a common practice to lynch Africans. They would come up with different reasons, they said, but we had a sister by the name of Ida Wells Barnett who showed that really, if it was a dispute over wages or that sort of thing, they would make up some trumped up charges. They would take an African, they would do the most horrific things to them, really things you don't even want to talk about. That involved maiming, castration, burning, all those sorts of things. And then they would take pictures of it. They would take souvenirs. The people who attended these things would take souvenirs of pieces of the person's body that are probably in jars right now in people's homes. And they would make postcards of it and send the postcards around. I actually happen to have pictures of some of those, but I'm just taking you through that period. The conscientious objectors of 1914 and World War I. They were brutalized. They were tortured, some tortured and killed. There were two brothers that were taken to Leavenworth because they didn't want to fight in America's wars. They were taken and they did what they call high cuff them. They would handcuff them to the bars with their hands up where they could barely touch the ground. There was one famous case of two brothers who died within days of each other after this type of brutal treatment. And we had what we, of course, we have the things that happened at Abu Ghraib. There are documents. You can go online and see the testimony from these are things that were done. This is a straight line progression. It's the things they did at Guantanamo Bay. The things they do at, they actually have secret prisons that the I'm trying to think of it. The Patriots Act permitted them to do. That permitted the government to establish prisons, snatch you from America. Nobody knows where you are, you know, how you got there, and or what they're doing to you in those places. So, you know, that's my short answer, because I believe me, I can go on, but certainly those things are happening to our political prisoners right now in the prisons. We have people that have been hung by their feet from, you know, I'm talking about political prisoners who are there right now. We have people who've been raped. We have people that all kinds of things have happened to them as a result of being in United States prisons, as a result of being those that were prisoners of war, political prisoners. All those things that happen. So America is really, it's a torture culture. If you were to really talk about it, it's a torture culture. All of the things they have, all of the wealth that accrues to them has accrued to them through the use of torture. And largely, a great deal of that was to African people. So I'm going to stop there. I will say this, though, that the condition that Pam described, there was a treatment that Mumia was allowed his condition to progress to this cirrhosis of the liver, which will very likely lead to cancer of the liver. And it was totally unnecessary. If they had just given him the medicine that he needed, which they did have a cure at that particular time. And those sorts of things are you know, for me, torture. Certainly the 30-year solitary confinement. Kaepernick told you, 30 years Mumia was in solitary confinement. All kinds of organizations have told you that solitary confinement is torture. So I can stop right there, because I don't know if you have any other questions you wanted to ask.
What is the medical community's responsibility to this issue, especially for those who are imprisoned? What is it? You know, we are familiar with the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm.
Yes.
How does that translate in imprisonment situations?
It's been expanded from the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is what it's based on, but the major medical organizations like the American Medical Association and the Red Cross and, you know, all of these organizations have kind of stated that, you know, doctors, or I should say the American Psychological Association, those organizations have stated physicians shouldn't participate in torture. They've been that they shouldn't be in any kind of way, not directly or indirectly. Sometimes they've been brought in those types of situations to prolong the person's life. Sometimes they've been brought into those situations to administer certain things that had to be done. But the AMA is very clear. You can't. What the physician is supposed to do is recommend release. That's the only thing he can do in that type of a situation, is recommend that the person be released. And that's although they have psychologists that have been on the payroll of the CIA and actually participated in these types of interrogations. You remember they had the torture memos that came through the government, in which they don't want to call it torture. They call it they don't even say what the CIA said. The CIA calls it harsh interrogation. They call it enhanced interrogation. If you could imagine that, blaring noises to a person 24 hours a day, not allowing them to sleep, or taking water, putting to induce in them the sensation of drowning. If you can imagine that those things are not torture, that's just enhanced interrogation, then you will understand how they could write a memo or write memos to that effect. And the exposure of this is what put another internationally known political prisoner where he is, Julian Assange. Okay. There's a quote I want to share with you and the viewing and listening audience, and then get your reaction to the quote. The late U.S. Senator J. William Fulbright, for whom the Fulbright Scholarship is named, said in his book, it's a very thought-provoking book. I often, when I speak on these issues, I recommend it. Published, many years ago, The Arrogance of Power. There's a telling quote in that book where he says, there are two Americas.
One is the America of Lincoln and Adlai Stevenson. The other is the America of Teddy Roosevelt and the modern super patriots. One is generous and humane. The other narrowly egotistical. One is self-critical. The other is self-righteous. One is sensible. The other romantic. One is good-humored. The other solemn. One is inquiring. The other pontificating. One is moderate. The other filled with passionate intensity. One is judicious, and the other arrogant in the use of great power. End quote. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd like to just have a repeat of one piece, which were the two names he associated with the good America. He gave I think Adlai Stevenson,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
And
Adlai Stevenson and Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, yes.
No.
No,
Those were the opposites.
Adlai Stevenson and Lincoln. I'm sorry, Adlai Stevenson and Lincoln was the better, the good America.
See, this is the type of thing that America does. I mean, I'm not saying that. What I would say is this: is that Malcolm X talked about the only difference between the Democrat and the Dixiecrat. I mean, there is no difference between them. These people he's citing as being so great, the great man. I mean, he damned himself with faint praise. In other words, Abraham Lincoln prosecuted a runaway slave when he was Abraham Lincoln exiled Africans to an island off the coast of Haiti called Davache, Ile Davache, Island of the Cow, which the people nearly starved to death, so on and so forth. Abraham Lincoln basically said that, if he could preserve the United States by freeing some of the slaves and letting others stay enslaved, or freeing all of them, not free. Just basically that it wasn't about slavery for him. It was about preserving the Union. So Abraham Lincoln was not, if that's the good America, he basically condemned America himself, because I don't believe there are these two Americas. There are people in America who are, who want right and who support good and that sort of thing. But if you talk about the major parties, the two major parties of America, they basically are, and I recognize that I'm on a show where people are, respect a certain type of language, but I would say they basically are urinating out of the same straw. I say that in the vernacular ordinarily, but I'm just going to say, no, that statement doesn't hold water for me. We would hope that there were two. One of them, if there are two, one of them is very quiet. One of them is not. They shouldn't be. They should be passionate, like the America. He says that like he's painting the right wing and the racists as being very kind of dogmatic. We need. Pam is not quiet. She can't be quiet because she feels what's happening to Mumia. She knew Mumia. She hurts with him when she sees the condition he's in. Mumia was a handsome, stately person, and to let disease and stuff take him like that, to make him where he doesn't even want to go to the hospital, because he can't put the water he ordinarily puts on his rash to try to soothe it. When they take him to the hospitals, when it just gets so bad, like when he had congestive heart failure, they shackle him, and he can't even soothe his own itching or his own. This is torture. Yes. And so I'm sorry. I don't know where you wanted to go with that particular statement, but I don't see the two Americas that he's talking about.
Okay, we are in the final minutes, and just as a recap for those who may have joined us late, and fortunately we will have a link available for folk to be able to revisit this conversation in its entirety. We opened the broadcast with 3 back-to-back videos. One on Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was born April 24th, 1954. A case that erupted in the early morning hours of December 9th, 1981. He was charged with the death of a Philadelphia police officer, Daniel Faulkner. He was convicted and given the death sentence, which was later converted to life imprisonment. We then showed the video of Imam Jamil, the video on Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H-Rap Brown. His date of birth is October 4th, 1943. His case erupted on March 16th, 2000, on the west end of Atlanta. He was charged with shooting 2 Fulton County, Georgia sheriff's deputies and the murder of 1. He was given a life sentence. The state was pushing for a death penalty, but thanks to the testimony of folks like former U.S. ambassador and former mayor of Atlanta, and civil rights activist Andrew Young, and many compelling elements within that trial that could not be ignored. The jury ended up coming back with a determination of life imprisonment as opposed to the death penalty. And then finally, we have the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui. Her date of birth is March 2nd, 1972. Her case erupted on March 31st, 2003, shortly after she returned home to Pakistan. See, Afia is a Pakistani national. She came to the United States for higher education when she was 18 years of age. She returned home to Pakistan following 12 fruitful years of higher education in the U.S. at the University of Houston, at MIT, and Brandeis, where she graduated from these 2 universities with honors. She got her PhD in cognitive neuroscience. 5 years after her and her children's kidnapping, her secret imprisonment and torture overseas in the name of a war on terrorism, she was brought back to the U.S. barely alive, put on trial just blocks away from Ground Zero, and then subsequently given an 86-year sentence for, quote unquote, attempting to kill U.S. personnel in Afghanistan. Nobody was injured but Afia Siddiqui in that claim that she attempted to assault U.S. personnel. And she was given an 86-year sentence. We wanted to provide these 3 very important case studies of 3 among the most prominent political prisoners in the world, to show a light on that question, that provocative question of whether or not, torture exists in this country. And you've already responded with your view on this. Our sister Pam Africa responded, and I agree with what both of you have said. Do you have any final thoughts? You about two minutes of a final thought that you would like to share with our viewing and listening audience in South Africa and beyond.
Yes, I would. Right now, the United States has a number of people, dozens of people who participated in the civil rights movement, who participated in the Black liberation struggle, and they are in their 70s and 80s. And some of them have passed on recently. Dr. Mutulu Shakur was in his 70s. Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin is in his 80s. Russell Maroon Schultz in his 80s. Jalil Muntakam has been released, but he's in his 70s. Sundiata Akoli in his 80s. Veronza Bowers was in his in his late 70s. I could go on. There are many, many more, all of them elders. So this is also elder abuse. And it's some of these people have been in prison for up to 50 years, over 50 years. It's time to release them. I don't care, even in a war. The Vietnamese, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese released the American prisoners at the end of that war. You don't keep people in prison under those kinds of conditions, because we haven't even described the conditions in the prisons, but they're harsh. for 50 years. You're very, when you speak about Afia Siddiq, the things that happened to her are unspeakable. Just a piece of her teeth being knocked out, that would be such a trauma for the average person they can't imagine. But that's not all that happened to her.
That's right.
So these are the things that these people people need to be passionate about their release, because it's wrong. These are people that basically struggle for you. Jamil Al-Amin didn't have to struggle for us. He was a person who, I mean, he had to because of what was inside of him. But I mean, he could have been, he could have had a career. He was a speaker, a moving speaker. That's why his nickname was Rap. You understand? So, he could have been one of these ministers of a mega church or whatever it is, but he's not. He chose to fight on our behalf. The average murderer in the United States spends 16.5 years in jail. These political prisoners have all done 2 and 3 times that amount of time. It's time to release them.
Absolutely. I want to thank you, my brother, for joining us today. And inshallah, God willing, we're going to have you back. And until then, may Allah bless the rest of your day. And Lutua continua, the struggle continues.
Same to you, my brother.
All right,
Thank you. I'm honored and happy that you had me on your show, and especially with a sister like Pam Africa.
Yes, indeed. All right, we're going to close out as we normally do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawasaw bil haqq. Wa tawasaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.